Terrific. So one more time, just for the sake of anybody who gets this on replay, Joe, we're super excited to have you here today to share your experience as an investor in real estate. We're continuing on the path of helping agents in our network understand what it means to move into the investor space, whether that's from a client standpoint. We also have a lot of agents in our space who really are interested in, dipping their toe in the water themselves and purchasing real estate. So you are, from many accounts within our group, the trusted person, the expert, the proven success as an investor in real estate. So thank you so much. Super excited to have you.
Thanks, Deanna. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So can you give us, as we dive in and start to share some of your strategies and best practices, what is your background? When did you get licensed? How did your path in real estate begin?
Yeah, so I actually had no intention of becoming a regular real estate agent. I went to school for accounting. I ended up landing a job. I don't know if you want to mute everybody in here.
That's what I'm working on right now. Yep.
I landed a job in accounting right out of school. I was a recruiter for like hedge funds and private equity companies. And I was seeing a lot of these people, like they kept buying real estate, investing into real estate. And I just knew from early on, I'm like, hey, I have to be involved somehow with real estate. So I ended up going to get my license. Like I said, I had no intention of becoming an agent. I already had a job in accounting, and I was just like, if I stay here, I'm going to make good money, and then I can just reinvest everything I'm making into real estate. I actually walked into a Keller Williams office, ended up meeting like my first team leader that I ended up joining with. I was still working in accounting at the time. And from there, I started to realize like, wow, I could actually make this a career instead of actually just being an investor. And just by becoming an agent, you get a lot more knowledge. I also worked an internship when I was in college for one of the top developers in Hoboken. So even from that point, I kind of had the real estate bug where I was running the accounting for 450 units in Hoboken. So we were collecting rent, dealing with tenants. They were doing, at the time, they were converting 3 families into single family luxury buildings. So I was watching them do that. I was helping project manage with the project manager. So I really got a big taste of the market early on. I was also like, it was such a small shop, but they owned so much real estate. I was actually the one that was cutting the checks for the owners. So I was seeing what the distribution tax checks were every single month. And I'm like, 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand. And it's like, they're sending it to their cousin in Cincinnati. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, clearly they know something more than I do. And that was when I first learned about like what a cash out refinance was, like really the meaning of commercial real estate and wealth building. But it all kind of came together once I became an agent. And then I was like, all right, they're at a large scale. How do I implement this on my scale and then continue to grow? But it's kind of a mixture of a couple things that all came together. But yeah, that's pretty much how I got started.
That's really interesting. And you're not the first person. I come from an accounting background too. So I feel like there should be a club of us who said it's a good start, but there's something sexier out there, right? Yeah. So that's awesome. So you saw your golden carrot. So what was that moment? Like, take us to the point where you said, okay, I'm ready. Let me find my first property. What did that look like for you?
So it actually took me a while. Like I first got into the business, my first 2 years, like I barely closed anything. And I actually completely quit accounting. So I had no income coming in. And I thought initially, I was like, I'm going to go right into being an investor. And I actually joined a mom and pop brokerage. It's actually pretty funny. Their brokerage switched over to EXP completely, actually before we even did. So I already knew about EXP beforehand. But I learned a lot about short sales, investment properties, fix and flip from this mom and pop broker. And from that, it took me probably two years to buy my first property. My first property, it was a 2-family in New Brunswick. I'm from the area, so I grew up in East Brunswick, so I know New Brunswick, and I've always been told, oh yeah, you got to get rentals in New Brunswick. You know, you have the college students and all that. And I ended up buying this two family. I lived in one of the units for 6 months, and then I rented it out after that, but I ended up selling it because the market went so high. But I realized quickly that early on, I was collecting rent. I was making probably about like $1,000 to $1,200 a month. But then I realized the amount of time that I was going back to this property, changing light bulbs, talking to tenants, doing all this other stuff. I said to myself, I was like, I can close 2 real estate deals and make $12,000 a year. So like, why would I even bother with this rental? And that's when my mind shift kind of changed to more so focused on fix and flip, and then really, really bigger projects that turn over capital.
And you had the property management experience too from your accounting role. So you understood all the resource that it does take, time, effort, and energy to
Yeah.
maintain a property.
I think the difference there, like we had a whole team in place where I can call the project manager, call the GC and go, hey, 123 Main Street has a leak in the pipe, and they would go over there. In my property, I had to physically go myself, and the property was 1930s. So, that was another mistake too. There were so many issues and underlying just deferred maintenance. Like the roof was slate. I knew what a slate roof was, but I didn't know that, okay, there's no wood underneath this roof. And guess what? Wood was through the roof during the time, the prices of wood at that time was crazy. So there was a lot of stuff that just, honestly, I didn't know, even being in the business, until you really own a property. And that's why I always encourage like any clients or any people that are looking to invest, like you got to just buy the first one, because there's so many things I figured out. Like I overpaid for the property and it still made sense.
So the experience is where you really cut your chops.
Yeah. So once after that one, everything became a lot easier, because then I quickly realized like, all right, maybe I shouldn't be picking up these rentals. Like I'm still young. I'm only 27. So I was like, there's no point in me having rentals to make $1,000 a month when I can buy a property, renovate it and flip it and make 50 to 150 in 6 months. So it didn't make any sense to me. So like the way I was looking at it was like the money I was deploying into rentals, I could have just put into fix and flip properties, which is how I started, just purchasing fix and flip properties. And initially, it started off with just regular renovation, but the problem is you compete with everybody in the market for regular fix and flip. Like everybody wants to get a house with, where you redo the kitchen, the floors, that kind of stuff. And I completely just went the opposite direction and was like, what is the most difficult thing to do in the market? And how can I make the most amount of money? And that's what I consider, it's like maximizing the value of the lot. So you actually look for properties like a Cape Cod or a ranch, and then you go to an architect, go to an engineer, and you pretty much say, what is the biggest property I can build on this lot? And what's the cheapest I can pay for this property? So obviously if it's complete tear down, it was in my favor. I didn't care about the kitchen, the bathrooms, anything. We would just completely tear it down or add an addition. So most of the stuff, what I try to do is I try to go the complete opposite direction of everybody else. And I look to buy houses that I can add additions to and build more value.
Interesting. That's a really interesting perspective. So just give us like timeline wise. So when was that first purchase that you made, the rental property?
The rental property was 1.5 years ago. So at the time, it took me like almost 2 years. One thing the biggest mistake I made early on in the business is I was trying to do like 20 things at once. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to be an agent. I'm still going to work in accounting. I'm going to open an Amazon store. I had like 45 things that I was doing. And then I quickly realized like, wait, if I just make the most amount of money being an agent, I can just take that money and reinvest it into something else. So then I was like, let me just go full force of being a regular buyer agent and listing agent and accumulate a lot of money. And then from that, translate that into investments. Because I work with so many agents, like even on our team and stuff. And they always like, I want to do this, I want to do that. And like, unless you're consistently making like 150,000, you really don't have like disposable income to even do anything. Once you pay like your living expenses, and if you have kids and a family, like it quickly diminishes. So, you don't want to be putting yourself at an insane risk either. I mean, I would say for me, I don't have kids or anything like that. So, I mean, I'm taking extreme risk for what it is, but you have to look at your specific situation.
Interesting. So in that time, in the last year and a half, from the time that you started with your first property and now having that mindset, which again, I think is really interesting, like finding your niche and being completely different from so many others in the space. Like, what happened in the middle there? Did you go through one or two fix and flips? Did you sort of progress to the point that you're at now? Or did you just right off the bat realize I need to figure out exactly where I want my specialty to be and then full force?
Yeah, so for a quick, all right. So when I first got into real estate, I was at Keller Williams. I left after 4 months because the team split up. I actually dabbled into commercial real estate for like 4 months. And I closed nothing, but I learned a tremendous amount, because what was happening was my job was just call, commercial real estate owners, and then I would go sit down with them, go over, their properties and see how we can potentially sell them. And the one common theme that I kept getting from them was like, all right, we're going to take this property and maximize the use, and like understanding the different use cases for each property. So taking a warehouse, putting it into apartments, making land into retail centers. So like I always had this vision in my head. I'm like, how can we maximize this at a smaller scale? And that's when, we started doing like add a levels addition. So anything I look at, I can always pay more. Like if somebody's looking to renovate this property, as a regular investor, I can always pay probably $20,000 or $50,000 more than what they're going to pay, because I'm going to add value to this property. So like what I do is it's called value add from a commercial standpoint, but it's value add from a residential standpoint.
So I really love that. That's, I think, a big takeaway is looking at a property from the lens of how do I maximize its use?
Mhm.
And then, like you say, so if you're looking at a property where somebody, another agent or an investor might think, okay, this is going to take $15,000 or $20,000 to spruce up the kitchen, update the bathroom, new flooring. You're looking at it and saying, I can build on an addition that gives another bedroom and bathroom, and I'm going to exponentially increase the value well beyond the new kitchen sink. And that's how you base your bid on the property to be more competitive on the front end.
Correct. Yeah. Like, for example, like everybody talks about lack of inventory. I think one of the easiest ways to solve this problem is change the use of the property. So if the township sat down and really cared about the town or cared about the direction of real estate, I feel like if they change all single family zoning to duplex zoning, and not multifamily, but duplex. So what that is a side-by-side townhouse. Just think about what will happen. Every lot now becomes a double lot overnight. So I've done this
Have
in
you done that?
Yeah. So I have projects in Linden right now that I'm working on, and the township has to be okay with it. But that's supposedly why these giant hedge funds are buying all these single families, is because in the future, there's no more land. So how do you increase the value of a single family? Well, guess what? You own 1,000 units of single family property. Now they say to you, oh, guess what? All these lots become duplex lots. You can now knock that house down, put a duplex, charge twice the amount of rent, or charge, increase. So like, for example, I bought a property in Linden. I paid for the lot was $200,000. If I fix that property up, renovate it as a regular property, it's worth 400,000, right? If I knock it down and build a 2-family, it's worth 750. If I knock it down and build a duplex, it's worth 1.2.
Interesting. Very interesting. So that's really super aggressive. So that tells me that you have to have a lot of confidence in your financial plan and in your approach. How did you get those ducks in a row? And how do you manage that from a financial standpoint? What are some strategies? And again, think of a lot of people wanting to dip their toe in this water for the first time.
Yeah.
How did you get the financial end of it in alignment where you could feel confident?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, we kind of stumbled upon it by mistake. So what happened was my first project, I pretty much, it sounds so crazy, but I sat there in my office and like I wrote down goals and I was like, you know what? I want to flip 4 properties this year. I was like, I've been telling myself I want to do this. I haven't done it. I'm like, I don't have the capability to do it. I barely know how to do hands-on stuff as it is. And the first person I thought of was this my partner now that I do a lot of business with. I picked up the phone, I call him, I go, what do you have right now that I can fund? Like, what can I, like, I have $100,000. What can I give you to fund the deal? Like, I don't care if I make $2 or $1. I don't even need to make money. I just want to put money out there to kind of learn and earn. And I think this is where a lot of, like, even too, like we raise money for a lot of projects and people approach me and I show them the numbers of the project because I want to show them the value of the project and show them that there's a lot of money in the deal. So there's no risk for their money. But then they always come back at me and go, well, you're making X and I'm making this. And I always say to them, I'm like, all right, well, I'll be honest. I don't actually need your money. I just want it to utilize your money so you can learn. I can go get money from TD Bank from a line of credit. I can go to MNT, get a line of credit. So a lot of times when my first deal, I pretty much funded the entire deal with the down payment. The rest of the money came from hard money. But I just paired up with somebody that was in the business, but you also have to be mindful, like it can't be somebody that's like way past you in the business because most of the time they have money being thrown at them. Like once I started doing a couple of deals, like banks are more willing to lend money. Like they see a track record and stuff like that. I see some people in the chat. So everyone's saying, how do you finance this? What exactly is hard money? So hard money is just like simple term is private money. So that's from like an outside, it's non-traditional lending. So what it is it asset-based lending. The asset, they look at the property and the project and the game plan you're going to give them for the property, and that's how they decide to lend on it. Usually like it's much more expensive than regular lending. It could be 10%, 12%. You're going to pay points on it and it's short-term money. It's more considered of a bridge loan versus a regular traditional loan. And then somebody asked, do you create an LLC? So for any of my projects, every property I have one LLC, depending on the partner is a part of that LLC. And then if we raise money, like let's say I take money from like one of you guys, then we would do a promissory note against the LLC.
And how about with your hard money transactions, Joe? Even just from my experience on the title side of things, oftentimes those deals are presented as cash offers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that when you present an offer on a property?
Yeah,
Do
I
you
mean,
treat your hard money as a cash offer?
yeah, I always do, and I think it's important to recognize. It really matters who you work with because, like, my hard money guys, like they can close in 7 days. I have different guys that can even close in 24 hours if needed. Obviously you're not going to have title, but as long as you know it's prelim title or whatever. But I always present it as cash. There's no mortgage contingency or anything. These guys do not care about anything on the actual transaction. It's the closest thing to cash.
Yeah. They're much they don't have any of the red tape that traditional mortgage companies looking for first lien position are worried about, right?
Yep.
So interesting. So and I know that there's we have a hand raised with Sarah. I just have one quick question just to build on that, and then Sarah will come to you. So you talk about how important it is to work with the right people.
Mm-hmm.
So from that standpoint, not just with your hard money vendors, but also even extending beyond that, you mentioned bringing in architects or engineers. How did you go about building that sort of arsenal of trusted people that you could tap quickly, lean into, and rely on?
Yeah, so it was kind of funny. Like for the first 2 years in the business, I went to so many networking events, like real estate networking events. And I actually met all these people like 2-3 years beforehand. So when I needed somebody, I just had them saved in my phone. I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, you're an architect, right? And they're like, yeah. And then it just kind of like fell in together. So I think I network a lot. I meet a lot of different people, and I always try to like look at how I can bring value to them and then how they can bring value to me and where they fit. Because there's different, like I have different engineers for different areas. I have different architects for different areas. I have different lenders for different projects. And like in the beginning, you're not going to know all these things. Like there's a couple projects I did and I'm like, wow, I probably shouldn't have used hard money, or wow, I shouldn't have used that community bank. They're terrible. And then you kind of learn along the way. But I think the biggest thing is like I like to sit down with everyone and kind of give them my game plan of what I'm looking to do and kind of see how they fit in. Because I will tell you, like speed matters in this game. And like what I do with edit levels and additions, I'm taking a huge risk because I'm leaning on my architect to let me know what could potentially be built. Like if he's wrong, my whole project is wrong.
And what type of due diligence do you do in those situations with the town? Like, how do you
Um,
prepare yourself to know if an addition or a tear down is even feasible?
So I look for other like product. Like I actually piggyback everybody else. I'll drive around a neighborhood, like I'll be showing clients like as an agent, and then I see, all right, there's an add level there. All right, there's an extension here. Obviously, there's already permitted use cases in the town that now you always can't leverage that because sometimes the town will change stuff. But then I'll lean on my architect to make a call over. He'll come out and pretty much make the final decision and say, yeah, you could do this.
Interesting. All right, awesome. Sarah, you have a question?
Hi, Diana. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Joe is my private coach.
Really?
Yeah, I'm his mentee.
You're lucky on so many levels. That's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I know he's brilliant.
Yes.
Joe, I have a question. So do you accept silent partners when you're doing projects? And what is the minimum?
Yeah.
You know, like is 50,000 enough, or that's like you won't even consider it?
Yeah, so as of recently, we've been doing minimum 50. And the way it's structured is anywhere between 10 to 12% 1 year note. So it's not against the property, it's against the LLC, which is a promissory note, but it's backed by the property. So what that essentially means is you wouldn't actually take on any of the debt or risk. It's like you just lending, a friend money. So it works in two ways, because I tell a lot of my investors, like, you don't have essentially if I return the money before the year's up, that 10% could easily be 20% because it's an annualized return. And then I always start with that with most investors and then kind of work our way up, because in the beginning, right, like your knowledge, like I have some investors that are like, I don't even want to know anything about the project. I just want to get paid at the end of 12 months and call it a day. Then I have other investors that are like almost like a learn and earn type thing. And, I'll bring them to the project. I'll be on, they can attend all the Zoom calls that we are, understand all the meetings, be in the group chats. So every single property, like we have like a strategic plan going into it. But it just depends the level of interest of the investor. Like I have like different parties. Like I have like one guy right now where like he literally does not care about anything. Like he doesn't want to know. He doesn't even want to drive the property. Literally just wants to get his check at the end of it and call it a day. And then I have other partners that honestly most of them are in the real estate industry that are like, hey, like I want to learn about this and understand more. And I truly feel like once I started spending money on things, like once I started investing into projects, I took it more seriously, because I'm like, oh, hey, my money's actually in this project. How can I provide value to this situation? And how can I increase it? I think where a lot of investors go the wrong way, or a lot of agents, they're trying to hit grand slams like day one. Like they'll look at the project and I'll show them, all right, well, there's about $400,000 worth of profit here, right? And then they're going to look at what's presented to them on the table is you're going to get a 12% return guaranteed, right? But they lose sight of like, what did it take our team to get to create that value in that project, right?
100%.
So like there's a certain like risk and reward too, because we're taking on all the debt, we're taking on the project management. I always laugh with some of my investors. I'm like, I just had a property where all the pipes froze. Like, do you want me to call you at 12 o'clock in the morning so you can go run over there to fix the pipes? Like, that's the reason why, like, we have it structured the way we have it structured. But yeah, I mean, it's possible, and it's something in the future that we're looking to create more of a fund, like a fund structure. And like, that's just me going full circle once again. Like, I used to audit private equity companies that did this exact thing, where they're creating funds to purchase real estate. It just gives us more leverage, gives us more ability, where you can, instead of investing into one deal, you can invest across 10, 20 deals. And I think real estate's cool because you can really see, like, I can bring you to the project. I can go, we just put in the cabinets, we did the floors, we did this, we did that. And now it's coming to life. Like, I've invested into crypto, I've invested into the stock market, I've invested into every other thing, and you have no control of that vehicle. So it's truly a very unique business.
Yeah, give me till the end of May.
Okay,
You're stuck with me, Joe. You're stuck with me.
no worries, I'm here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. So I think there was something really important in there that we shouldn't overlook in what you were just describing, Joe, is that you mentioned, having Zoom calls, having a group chat. You really are very organized from the word go, not just with the professionals that you're bringing together, but then in the way that you structure the communication, set expectations, and then keep up with that throughout the process. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's something that, especially as you're trying to bring in all these experts, that people might not give consideration to with their first or second time out of the gate.
Yeah, I think a lot of that experience comes from being an agent, because being an agent, you're always that quarterback, and you have to get these two people to communicate to each other. You have to hit certain timelines. So on a smaller scale, we're doing it as agents on a construction roadmap, and setting that up. It becomes more difficult, but there's a lot of what I learned of being an agent. And then also too, like, it's the same kind of industry, so it's a parallel. But usually what we'll do is we'll set up a Slack channel with that specific property. Every person involved on that project will be in that Slack channel, and every single type of communication from, the survey came in and here's the PDF, that's all calculated and understood. And we usually meet once a week to set up, like, what are the targets we want to hit? We want to have the cabinets done by this week. We want to have this done, and be very strategic about it, because time is money. Every single day we're paying interest on projects, and I got to pay taxes, I got to pay heat, I got to pay electric and stuff like that. So the more efficient I can be, the quicker I can turn things over. The more money we'll make, and then the quicker the projects will go, and we can redeploy the money.
Awesome. And just a reminder to anybody as you're listening, if you have questions, feel free, don't hesitate to raise your hand, or if you have a comment or want to share a story, feel free to raise your hand or throw something in the chat. We're keeping an eye on that. So tell us, in the last couple of years, Joe, what are a couple of the biggest pitfalls or learning lessons that you've gotten out of your time so far in putting these projects together?
Biggest pitfalls is townships do not care about you or what you're trying to make the town better with. They really don't. Every single township I've been in, they act like they want to make things better. And honestly, they just want to get promoted within their role. They really have no desire to make that town better. And it's a sad thing to say, but that's literally, we deal with so many things in New Jersey itself. There's so many rules, regulations, especially around tenants. Like, I bought properties with tenants. You as a landlord, unfortunately, in New Jersey, you really don't have many rights. It's all to the tenants. But the way I look at it is, I go to myself, all right, well, if there's all these rules, all these regulations on it, it creates a barrier to enter. So, like, what I do with additions and add levels and stuff like that, I have to go to the township, I have to get a variance, I have to network within the town, I have to meet the building contractor, I got to discuss with them beforehand. So I have a competitive edge if I do these things. Like, it's very difficult to wake up tomorrow and go, I'm going to go create a duplex in this town. Right. So I try to create these, like, super edged out, like, niches within the marketplace versus just trying to do what everybody's doing. Because, and then also too, if I can get an edge in a certain town where I know the building inspector, I know everybody in that town, my projects will go a lot quicker and my deals will always get accepted faster. So I think, you know, a pitfall kind of turned into a positive thing was just understanding that you don't have a lot of control, a lot of things, but you know, if you think like a regular investor, I think where a lot of people make the mistake is they don't realize this is a people driven business. And that's like, for the longest time, like I was like, why aren't they like, why isn't my project getting passed in the township? And like, I never physically went there in person, like shook the building department's hand or do any of that type of stuff. And now more than ever, like I'm trying to show face, build my brand, and all of our projects, like we have our brand on there. And I want them to see when they drive around in their code inspector car that I'm the one building these projects. And I want them to know that. And also from a lending standpoint as well, all of our lenders are promoted on our projects because I want them to feel like it's more than just like, we're just trying to turn over a profit. Like we're trying to make the community better, because if we build a better product, obviously more like better people are going to come, and then it's going to just snowball effect within that town.
The relationship leads to the reputation, which makes the path smoother for you going forward in that town, for sure.
Yeah. And every town's different. And there's certain towns, like people say, like, I never want to work in. And I always try to get into those towns, because if you don't want to, like, if a contractor is saying that tells me right off the bat, there's obviously some type of like issue in the town, but you can kind of capitalize on that because everybody at face value is going to be scared of the town. So I'd rather be the one person that it'll be as simple as I'll go to the township, build a couple relationships. I've even like thought about sending them stuff. Like it sounds crazy, but if I just send them stuff like, oh, here's donuts for the whole team at the township, and even too, when it comes time when I need to get a C of O for my client, they're not busting my chops for, oh, you got to wait 2 months, or, oh, your client didn't have a GFCI outlet. Right. So I kind of changed the way I thought about it. And that's even my lending partners or anybody I work with. Like a big thing for me too, is like a lot of contractors, investors, like the way you pay contractors is you draw money from the bank, then pay the contractor. I don't do that. I have credit lines and I pay them on the spot, because I want them to keep doing work for me and not run away. Like most of the time, like managing these projects are difficult because most of these contractors go from project to project to project. They're not making any money. They have no idea how to build a business. And most of the time I'll sit down with them and just tell them straight up, like, I can give you plenty of work, but I need your level of commitment on the property. So like just being able to build relationships with people like that, where like they know that they're going to get paid on time, it makes a difference on how they work. Like when I'm not there, they show up. When things hit the fan, they show up, right? If you don't pay your people and you don't do the right thing, or you don't treat them right, they don't show up, right? When I had a gas leak in my property, they showed up when I called them. If you're not paying your contractor, they're just gonna be like, why am I going to go help this guy? This guy can't even help me.
You step up the motivation game like instantly.
Mm-hmm.
How about Michelle had a question in the chat. Do you do anything with short-term rentals? Do you do anything now in the rental space at all?
Rentals, I kind of just stayed away from as of now. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just for my time horizon, it doesn't make sense. And my idea is I'm going to take the profits from the flips that I'm doing and buy something bigger. The short-term rentals, I really haven't done much with. I've done a couple Airbnbs. I think it's a little overplayed, because you can make more money, but you have to really understand what's your time worth. You see a lot of these guys that are selling courses, and anytime I see that, then I know there's something else going on to it. In the beginning of Airbnb, yes, I have partners and friends that have made a tremendous amount of money with Airbnb. I think right now a lot of them are getting out of it, because you're not, like, just to make a little bit more money than what you would rent, it's not worth the headache of every single time you have to send somebody in to clean the property. You have to turn over these units. it's a little bit of a headache. I think because of the market of COVID, they drove a lot of people towards short-term rentals because they're like, oh, like I can kick this person out at any time. But I think now people are starting to realize like, I'd much rather have a long-term lease because I don't want to be an active investor. I want to be a passive investor where I'm just collecting rent. And yeah, maybe I have to change a light bulb or I have to fix a toilet or do something like that, but that's far few in between. Every single time somebody moves out of that Airbnb, they have to turn over and go for it. So I haven't been a fan of it. And New Jersey, you're not getting short-term, like if you're in Florida or you're in states where you have all year round tourism, like no one really comes to New Jersey for short-term rentals, maybe beach rentals, but those are insane.
Nobody's coming in January.
Yeah.
So how about if you are looking at a rental property, or if somebody listening is considering rental, that maybe they want to try their hand in investing and they like the idea of the steady income sort of long term being a cash cow for years to come. Would you recommend from your viewpoint that they consider property management at some point, that they sort of take that responsibility and put it onto a vendor, so that the vendor's getting those phone calls and not them? Or do you think it's better to be more hands-on if you go the route of rents?
Yeah, I always say the first property you should handle, just because it's hard for you to hire somebody to do a job you don't even know how to do yourself. So what ends up happening is I have a lot of clients that try to hire somebody right out the gate, but they're getting screwed over. They don't realize it. And until you learn how to manage a property, I think, most of my investors, I start off with like smaller condos. Like I'm like, let's go get a 1-bed, a 2-bed condo. It's 200,000, 250,000. It's simple. You don't have to worry about exterior. You don't have to cut the grass. You don't have to worry about the inside of the property and collecting that rent. I think too many investors have a misconception where they're going to be making tens of thousands of dollars on every single rent. I would say majority of properties you're making close to $500, if that, a door. Most of my condo people that they purchase like 10 condos like every year, one every year. They'll make little to nothing on those properties. But the way I look at it is, if you had $100,000, there's only so many things you could do with it, right? You can keep it in the bank where you're losing 10 to 11% every year. So that's a waste of time. You can put it in a high yield savings, making 3 to 4%, right? You can give it to another investor, make 10 to 12%. You could put it in a property and make 8 to 12%. But then remember the percentage you're making, like if you go buy a $200,000 condo, that's a 1-bed and you're renting it out for $2,000, let's just say you're making $100 or $200 a month. I more so look at that as like, it's a forced savings plan that has appreciation attached to it. The cash flow is just a bonus. And most of the properties, I have an investor right now that's buying just that with me right now. And I told him, I was like, just take the money you're making, the $100, $200, put that into your bank account, into the property account. And then that's going to be any like deferred maintenance or anything like that. And then at the end of the year, if you want to do a distribution yourself, you can. But what I think people underestimate is, if I bought one condo worth $200,000 for every year for the next 5 years, what does it cost me to do that? And what is the value I have that I'm controlling? So real estate allows you to leverage, which allows you to control bigger property and make more profit. So it would cost me, let's just say we're buying these properties at 20% down, right? We have 10 properties or 5 properties that we're buying at $200,000. It would cost us close to over $200,000 to buy those projects. Every year, it would be about $40,000 to close on those projects, right? But now you have a massive portfolio of $1 million that you're not paying down. So if you did absolutely nothing as an agent or in real estate or anybody, like I would just encourage you to buy one property. Like if you wanted to be the safest, most like reserved investor, it would literally be buy a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom condo every year that you just need a down payment of $50,000. And like we said, if you're making 150,000, you should be saving that. So that should be a part of the game plan, because what happens is now in 30 years, let's say you're 30 years old, now you're 60 years old, all those properties are paid off. And, if you have kids, you can pass along one of the properties to them. If you want to refinance those properties, if you want to take equity against those properties, you can. You have a physical asset, where with, a 401k or anything like that, if you retire at 60 and the market crashes when you're 59, there's no value there.
Absolutely. Really interesting. I love that insight, Joe. Okay, we have a couple of questions. Rochelle, you want to jump in?
Hi, thank you so much. This is
Morning.
great. Okay, Joe, I have a question. You mentioned when you first started, you attended a couple of investor groups. Do you have any recommendations for local investor groups around this area?
Yeah, so I haven't been to many recently because of COVID and stuff. A big one that I used to go to, I don't know if he still does it. His name's Nick Tang. Other than that, there was also another one, NJRESN, which was John Steingraber, which is Michelle Pius's husband. So he does a lot, but I haven't really seen him recently. I'll tell you the truth. Like, I've been joking with like my partner and a couple of people, like, we should just start one, because like we have a lot of people that want to learn and understand stuff. So
Can you please? Can you
Yes,
please?
please.
Look how
Yeah.
many tickets you already sold.
Yeah.
27.
Yeah,
Well,
so
I'm going to be honest. I mean, I see, just like anything, you type something up and the next thing you know, you're getting bombarded with things on social media and whatever, and, things coming at you,
Mhm.
courses. And, there was one that I just took, it's free to begin with. And, I've worked with a couple of flips, a couple of investors. So, I know a little bit basically, but one of the courses, they're asking people for 20,000 just to sign up for the course. And I feel bad for some people, because some people out there don't have a clue. And I just feel like that 20,000 can go to fund,
Down payment.
exactly. I'm like, there's no
Yeah.
way I'm paying that. That's for sure.
So
Um,
I think what's way better than now, I don't like, I have a lot of people, like, I used to be very against like courses and all this stuff. And last year, like, I'll tell you, I spent close to 100,000 on coaching.
mhm.
So I didn't realize the value into it until I actually spent my own money on it. And there's a tremendous amount of value. So I'm not going to say that that course isn't valuable, but do I think there's a better way to go about it? Yes. And that's find somebody in your marketplace that you want to learn from what they're doing, and literally go just like what I did and go, hey, I have the capital, you have the know-how. Let's partner up and let's figure something out. And that's honestly what we're trying to create eventually is I want more of a fund structure where it's not individualized for each project. It's like you invest into our fund and then you also learn about the process, because essentially you guys are all agents. So if you're coming across deals and I educate you on how to find these deals, then we can just partner on them together and then we all win. Instead of, a lot of you guys, you'll find your investor a property, they'll make $100,000. You might make like 8. But how are you capitalizing on that? And a lot of things too, like any of my investor clients, like if I get a deal together for them, most of the time, like I want some sort of equity on the sale of the property, not just the listing, and like, until you understand and can provide value, you can start to do that. But yeah, that's something that you could even work towards as well. But I would probably take that money and invest that in. Most of the time, like, you just have to look at what your goals are and what you want to do. If you want to start accumulating rental properties and stuff like that, that's great. But you have to remember there's always an opportunity cost, right? If I have $20,000 today and I do something with it, I won't have it anymore unless I'm able to get it back. But if like, here's the thing, if you invest $20,000 into a course and you make 100, that's way better than investing into a rental property. And that's the way you have to look at it. Like I spent $60,000 on a course, but it's probably helped me amass hundreds of thousands of dollars of knowledge that I can, apply out there. So it's all relative. I would say in the beginning, that's why it's so important to invest back into yourself versus going into projects and stuff like that. But you also have to understand, like, you have to eventually pull the trigger, because if you don't, you'll always just be sitting there waiting on the sidelines. It's never going to be a perfect situation. Like, I have certain clients that try to look for every perfect deal, and I just go to them like, you're just wasting your time, because you have to understand is when you buy one property, you're going to get better. Like, you're going to learn, like, there's no way. Let me tell you, if you put $50,000 on a property, and especially if you're not investing with somebody else, it's just you will learn. Because if you don't learn, you're going to lose money.
Thank
You're
you.
motivated. Awesome. And yeah, I agree with Sarah. Just start the networking group, Joe. You're gonna get some people to show up.
Yes, please. My name goes first. I'm signing up.
Well, it's
Okay.
nice also to work with people that are local to your area. Like that particular group, they're based out of Texas. And I don't know, I would rather work with local investors and learn from local people as opposed to somewhere, out in the Midwest. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rochelle, I agree with you 100%. And that was something that I went for. I was looking for a private coach, and everybody was like just on stage teaching something from the book. And I was losing money left and right till I found Joe. I took his course. And then I didn't tell you this, Joe. Me and Jean sat down. My production in 2021 was 1.2. That's it in the whole year. And then this year is 5 million. 5 million
I was
plus.
going to say, you did like 1.2 last month. So congrats.
Yeah, and it went from
Excellent.
1.2 to 5 million plus
That's
from
amazing.
taking their course, because they teach you everything. They're boots on the ground.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's the thing that's hard sometimes. You're right, with like other states and stuff, because I'll tell you, a lot of the stuff I talk about here, you can't even do in Texas. Like, that's
Exactly.
it's a totally different investment style. And then also too, like, because like what happens is, like, I know when people took courses from other places, because they're like, oh, we're gonna make $1,000 a month on this rental. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, it doesn't work in New Jersey.
Right.
But the difference in New Jersey, so what's interesting about New Jersey too is, like, you can go 30 minutes in any direction and be in a completely different world.
100%.
So like the way I look at rentals too is, like, you have like your A market, your B market, your C market, your D market. So like A is all about appreciation, which is like Hoboken. Hoboken, most of the time, you're not making any cash flow. All it is about appreciation, increasing rent. A B market is like, you're like good schools, you have appreciation, okay, cash flow. I would consider, like, for you guys who maybe know, like East Brunswick's like a B market. It's not a Hoboken, right? Because it doesn't appreciate as quick, but values stay standard and they increase over time gradually. A C market is somewhere like Newark. You have more of a renter base in that marketplace. Your cash flow is going to be higher, but your appreciation is not going to be as good over the long term. Then you have a D market like Camden, Trenton. Your cash flow is going to be through the roof, but now you have to deal with lower level tenants. You have to deal with property management issues, and you probably have zero to no appreciation on those properties. So once you understand kind of like those different markets, then you can kind of decide at where you want to be. You pretty much, ideally, you want to be in a C market that's turning into a B market. So somewhere like Newark, where it's appreciating rapidly and also has good cash flow. The problem comes in is, like, depending on where you like are in your life or whatever it is, like that comes into the factor. Like you have to realize, like, you're running a business. So you have to understand like who the tenants are in the areas and stuff like that. That's why a lot of times, like, if you go to an area with like really, really good schools, most of the time, like, regular single families for rentals never make sense, because people are willing to overpay for that house to be in a good school district. Right. And most of those people live there, and you're not going to find a lot of distressed property in an area with like good schools. And that's where really most of the opportunity is.
What do you think
So,
Neptune would be?
okay.
Would Neptune be like a C turning into a B?
Neptune, I'm not too familiar with. I do know Neptune does allow Airbnbs. That's the only reason I've heard of it. Because I have a couple projects in Keansburg right now. Where like same thing in Keansburg, like you mentioned Keansburg, everybody runs the other way. I'm like, okay, let's go invest in Keansburg because no one's doing it. The township honestly, over the last couple of years has been really good and getting better. And I see a lot of people from Asbury buying in Keensburg. So to me, that's like, all right, these bigger guys are buying Keensburg. That tells me they've already done their due diligence. As far as Neptune, I can't really speak too much on. I would just say the quickest way to figure that out is you have to look at median household income. So if you look at what the average median household income is in New Jersey, which is probably like 60,000, and then you look at what the average median household income is in Neptune. If Neptune's like 35,000, 40,000, what does that tell me? That tells me that this town, most people can't afford to buy a house, so they have to rent. So if you go look at the median household income in Newark, it's like 35,000 or 30,000. For the state of New Jersey, it's 60,000. So think about that for a second. If the median, like that's combined income is 35,000, they can't afford to purchase a home. So they have to rent.
Joe, I have a
Interesting.
question. What do you think of the sheriff's sales? Like, would you pick up a home from there or no?
I used to represent clients at sheriff sales. You just have to understand the process of like the foreclosure process in New Jersey, which a lot of people don't get. So essentially, once you miss a payment on your property, you get a lis pendens, which pretty much says, okay, we're going to start to sue you. You're not making payments. Then after the 3rd month, it goes to notice of default. Once you get a notice of default, you get a big packet from the bank that says, all right, Sarah, you're not making payments in your house. We're going to sue you and litigate and take you to court. Now, from the time you get notice of default to the time you get foreclosed on in New Jersey is insane. It could take anywhere from 2 to 3 years. So up until that time, so if you have equity in the home, you could sell it. If you don't have equity in the home, you can do a short sale. Now, if the bank doesn't approve the short sale, then where does it go? It goes to the sheriff's sale. Now, at the sheriff's sale, the bank you still have another option to buy it. Most of the time, like you really got to have like an inside person with title to run title on these properties before you go, because you never know if somebody has like a medical lien or something. It's not always clear title at a sheriff's sale. So
I got that. That's the easy part. I got close points.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. But I mean, just so you know, like there's most of those like I'll give you like you'll see some brokerages, right? You've never even heard of that do short sales. Like all of a sudden it's like, who is this broker? Like I've never even seen this company, and they only do short sales. So I used to work at a brokerage that does that. Like they're like these fly by night brokerages. They don't want to be known because it's a dirty business. Like they do not want to be known. So essentially what they do a lot of the time is they're going to meet these homeowners. If they can't help them with a loan modification, let's say they're underwater on the home, they'll actually try to buy the property at the short sale stage, right? But guess what? If I know a property is not going to allow to be a short sale, I already know the owner. I know what the property looks like. I've been inside it. So guess what? Me and you go to the sheriff's sale. You're bidding against me. I already know the owner. I know what it's worth. I know the rehab costs. I've been inside the property. Most of the properties you quote unquote can't go into. That's not true. You can go into them if somebody lives there or you help them do the short sale. So you have a competitive advantage on them if you know that beforehand. A lot of times though, things get overbid in the sheriff's sale, I've noticed. And I just also notice if you don't have an inside track on those deals. I've been at sheriff's sales, like the one in New Brunswick, I hate going to because every time I go there, there's a list of 50 properties. And somehow once they start calling them, there's only 5.
That's so true. I was there 2 weeks ago. I'm going there today too.
Because most of the time, like they pull them off the list. They give them to somebody in the town that they know because they want to make sure that they're going to do the right thing for the property or they're going to try to make money from it. And nobody wants to say that, but that's what happens.
Makes sense.
How do you find your
Interesting.
properties, Joe? Are they like off market or?
I would say majority of them are agents or wholesalers. I used to market a lot. I used to call a lot. And then I was just like, how can I be the laziest person about getting deals? And honestly, it's literally just wholesalers or other agents. Because like I'll speak at an event like this and then you guys will like, your mind will start going and then you'll find 5 properties and I'll get like 5 text messages after this like, hey, I saw this. What do you think? And I'm like, that's actually a good deal. Let's buy it.
And I think too, goes back to your original point, you need to know what your goals are.
Yeah.
before you look at those properties. If your goal is to hold it and capitalize on that long-term appreciation, maybe, bank your few $1,000s a year, or are you looking to, like you say, maximize use, tear down, renovate, all those things I think you should know going into it, because it really affects how you look at something as whether it's a deal or not.
Yeah. So what I tell all my agents on our team, as well as investors, I sit them down. There's really only 3 strategies like in the business that I see it. It's there's fix and flip, there's tax reduction, and then there's cash flow. Like those are really only the 3 strategies you can do with real estate. Within fix and flip, there's additions, there's regular renovations. Within cash flow, there's different markets, right? Like ones with higher appreciation, there's ones with higher cash flow, where a lot of people don't realize the easiest place to sell as an agent to sell investors is tax reduction. So you get a doctor that's making $250,000 and they have $100,000. A lot of times, like the doctors will they'll call me and they'll be like, I want to make $1,000 a month. And I'm like, let me just rephrase this to you, because that doesn't exist. What you read on YouTube, whatever you read, does not exist. I was like, this strategy though will work for you. And this is to reduce your taxes on your W-2. So if you have friends or family that are high W-2 earners, like they 100% need to be buying real estate as a tax reduction strategy. It has nothing to do with cash flow. Like I used to, in commercial real estate, they sell properties with, it's called a zero cash flow deal. And all it's for is depreciation and tax reduction. Has nothing to do with earning money. Because your biggest tax for most of us, or your biggest expense is taxes for most of us, right? So there's also a difference between wealth creation and wealth preservation, right? Like a lot of people mix this up. So when I first got into the business, like I was learning how to like buy rental properties and grow wealth, but like I didn't have a nest egg. I had no wealth. So like fix and flip is wealth creation. Being an agent is wealth creation. You're accumulating money to then create it and preserve it. Like the wealthiest people in the world, like they're not trying to create any more wealth. They're just trying to preserve what they have and not decrease in value. It's not a game of, let me make the highest returns now. It's a game of how can I limit the amount of exposure to the market at all times.
Absolutely. Very well put. Jennifer, you've been super patient. You have a question for Joe?
No problem. Thank you so much, Joe and Deanna, everybody. It's been so helpful. So question for you. So as a newer agent, I just started working with a brand new investor. So I'm trying to guide him in the right way. There's a couple of properties that we're looking at, and it's a multiple offer situation. So how do you go about writing up a competitive offer in a multiple offer situation where he's still going to make money and not overpay for the property?
So yeah, let's think about, so what bucket does he fit in? Is he fix and flip? Is he cash flow? Is he tax reduction? Because that
Fix
depends
and
on how
flip.
the offer.
Okay, so fix and flip, and he can go up as high as between 100 and 150,000 cash.
Okay. And what are the offers at, you think? Like they're over that, or?
Well, according to the listing agent, they haven't had asking price, but they've had close to asking price. And it's only been on the market for like 6 days, and very, like you said, low inventory and very, very competitive.
Yeah. So what you want to find out from that agent, like, do you have any owner users that are putting offers out? Because if you have somebody that's willing to live in a property, I'm always going to outbid you as an investor. So like, I wouldn't, the hard thing first is your guy's a brand new investor. Like that's the first hardest thing, is like when they're a brand new investor, like a lot of times, like if you don't know as much and they don't know as much, it's just like, it's difficult. But like as you learn more, you can educate them more. The best thing to do in this situation is find out what kind of offers on their table, whether it's all investors, are they all cash, are they financing? Like if your guy is cash, then you have to try to, in these type of deals, you have to present doubt to the listing agent, and you have to say, all right, you can get more money, but a regular owner user is not gonna, they're gonna come back, they're gonna do a regular inspection, they're gonna fight you on it. If they even do like a 2 or 3K, like those could be a disaster loan, because like if the numbers don't make sense, for a 2 or 3K loan, which is like regular loan for homeowners that they can buy a investment property to renovate. If those numbers don't work, they'll back out. So you want to just keep setting doubt into the listing agent and ensure that your client, is paying all cash. There's little to no risk. Maybe try to waive the inspection entirely if you can.
Okay.
Most of my deals, like once I walk the property, like I'm good. The only thing I want is a tank sweep just to confirm there's no tank on the property. But everything, I've been in enough properties where I can go, okay, like I'm willing to take the risk. I know, as long as, there's no tank on the property, then I'm good for it. But you want to make sure like price is always number one, but the terms associated with the price. A lot of times when I'm buying property directly from a homeowner, I always tell them like I'm not going to give you the best price, but I'm going to make this the easiest transaction. And it's about speed and convenience. You don't have to have 100 people walking through your home. You don't have to go through an inspection. You don't have to deal with the township. That's the other thing too, is like a lot of times, like on these deals, I'll handle the C of O. Like I'll go to I'll close with a temporary C of O because it's one less thing that the homeowner has to do. I'll even sometimes pay for their transfer tax. I'll be like, I'll pay for your transfer tax of $1,500. I'll pay for your attorney. I'll pay for all closing costs. Like those little things matter. And then also, what's the situation of the seller? Do they need to stay there for a month? Okay, I'll give you a month for free. Do they need to move their stuff in storage? All right, I'll give you $1,000 to go put your stuff in storage.
Okay, so when you're writing up the offer, how much of an earnest money deposit do you recommend putting down? What are your closing date terms? Do you, like you said, do you waive all inspection? What if the buyer is hesitant to waive the whole inspection because he's new and he doesn't know what he's getting himself into?
Yeah, so I would at least waive it just for major items. So structural, environmental, mechanical, so that at least you're protected if there's a hole in the roof or an issue with the furnace. The more you can waive, the better. And that just depends on what his like skill sets are of what it is. If he doesn't know construction and stuff like that, it's going to be more difficult. When it comes to earnest money, if you're doing cash, I would put everything up front. Because if I get an offer from an agent and you literally put it's 150, you put $100,000 in escrow, that tells me right away, like, okay, you're not playing games, like you're 100% serious on this property and you're ready to move forward. So I would put as much as possible. Minimum, I usually do like, on a $150,000 deal, like 25,000 minimum. But the more money, I think the better. And then the closing terms, I would offer like a 2-week close, 3-week close. And then, if they want to stay back in the home, you can, they can rent back from you for a certain period of time or whatever.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. And then in that case too, Joe, there's a difference between you understanding when you are the investor, you know how much risk you're willing to absorb, as opposed to being an agent to an investor where you really have to have the conversation and ask the questions about how much risk they're willing to absorb, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah. I always stress to them too, like it's never going to be perfect, and there's certain properties you might overpay for in the short term, but you'll make it up on the long term. Like I've overpaid for a lot of stuff and I'm like, I like win the bid and I'm like, I should have never bid at 20,000 over. But like, then when I'm done with the project, I'm like, okay, like we made X amount. Like, I don't really care at this point, but you can't get lost in the numbers, but you have to make sure too, that they know how to run their numbers. Like you have some investors that literally come to me and they know nothing. Like they're like, I want to invest. What do I do? And I honestly stop them when I go, you should invest into my project before you even think about doing anything with yours. Cause you're going to lose your shirt on this project. Like I had an investor recently that didn't listen to me on the numbers. And I was like, you can't sell it for that. And like, he got pissed off and I'm like, I know. I was like, you can't sell it for that. I was like, I'm telling you right now, like, don't waste your time. He ends up buying it. And then he listed it with another agent and I watched it sit there for 200 days on the market in this market.
Wow.
And then he like messages me like after like, oh, we sold it for this. I'm like, you just got lucky because the market's high right now. But like, there's no way like that, like how much money
They're carrying it for 200 days.
how much money did he lose for 200 days? So like, you always want to know your numbers of what the property could potentially be worth, right? A lot of times, like, agents unfortunately don't even know how to run those numbers because they don't even know how to run regular comps, right? So it's difficult to look at a project and go, what is this thing worth? It's even more difficult to look at a project and go, if I put an addition, what is it worth? Or if I do this extension, what is it worth? Right? So you really, really have to know comps, and that starts with understanding just regular comps. So I think it's super important to know your market and stick to areas that you know. Like, a lot of times, like, I'll get a deal from somebody, it's like in Hackensack, I'll look at the numbers, I'll put it in my spreadsheet, and I'm like, oh, numbers make sense. But like, I don't have the resources. I don't know anybody in the town. Like, I think about, like, yeah, the profit's there, but like, my resources are not in that area. So if I need somebody to redo the floors, it's just economies of scale. I have to now send somebody all the way up there and then come back down. Doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. So there's a lot more to it than just the financial. Excellent. And I think too, not for nothing, but HGTV makes everything look like a grand slam home run, even when, about 30 minutes into the episode, things always go wrong. Then the sunshine always shines bright at the end. So I think that's really hard for people to match up the reality against that sort of dramatic expectation on TV.
Yeah, it's definitely not HGTV.
Yeah.
They only show you the pretty stuff.
I can
Yeah,
tell you that firsthand, like, dealing with like pipes freezing, dealing with, toilets falling through the ceiling, dealing with tenants just fighting each other, dealing with like termite damage that you didn't anticipate once you open the walls and now it costs X amount, basements flooding. Like, there's so many things that people do not realize. And that's why sometimes, like, when I speak to investors, like, I know where their mindset already is if they're already telling me like all the positive things. Like, they're like, we're just going to knock out this wall we're going to put in the kitchen. Like, they start talking like that, like most of my clients. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But, you still got to deal with. And also too, people don't realize the holding cost. Like I said before, like, I'm writing checks all day before I get paid on a project. So I have to manage the cash flow of these projects. I have to request draws. Everyone's like, oh, okay, the project's 200,000 to buy, 100,000 renovation. You don't get that 100,000 up front unless you know the lender. They're gonna literally make you front the money. Then they come out to inspect and they go, you know what, this is not 20% done. This is 15% done. So we're only going to give you this. And then you have to deal with, what do you do if you don't have money? Right. So like, there's a lot of hurdles and stuff like that. And that's where, like, we supplement our deals with lines of credit. So like, I have lines of credit with other banks where I pay for the deals up. I pay for a lot of the materials up front, and then I get refunded by the bank. But if my first couple of deals, like, I was sitting there, I'm like, how do people do this? Like, I have to pay 10, 20,000 out of my pocket day one to fund this project. HGTV is making it look like they're doing the bathroom and kitchen day two. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, my project is not even like done.
yeah, absolutely. All right, great. One other question for you, Joe. If somebody who's just getting started, would you ever consider leveraging your own personal asset, maybe taking out a line of credit or a home equity and using that equity to help fund your first purchase as an investor?
Yeah, 100%. So it's funny. When I first got into this business, like, my mindset was like, how can I be the most resourceful person I could be? Like, I almost didn't want to intertwine my agent business with the flip business. I wanted to pretend like I didn't have any resources, anything like that, besides a little bit of capital and knowledge. So in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm going to fund deals with my own money. But then I started to realize, like, if I liquidate my account, now I have no money for anything else, right? So there's always an opportunity cost. So over, honestly, the past 6 months, I figured out, you can either do a home equity line, right? Home equity line, you can get up to 85% LTV of your personal primary residence. If it's an investment property, you can get up to 70% LTV, and we'll use lines of credit like that. Those are good, but I'll tell you, I always don't use them because they are in your own name. Like, I don't like using products within my name. I don't want anything in my name. Like, any of the debt I owe, like, it's probably close to like 2 million plus right now of debt. It's not in my name. Like, if you look at my credit, you won't even see it. You'll see my primary and that's it. But I have taken home equity lines. I also do unsecured lines of credit. So you can go to your bank and you can get unsecured lines of credit up to like 100,000, where it's no document. They won't even look at anything. They just ask you, how much do you make? What are you using it for? And that kind of thing. One thing I learned too, when you're a real estate agent, nobody wants to lend you money because it's not like they don't consider it as a legitimate business. So that becomes more of a challenge. So I've kind of transformed my business into a consulting agent business, and I was able to get lines of credit. A new one that I just came to realization of is actually better than a line of credit, better than liquidating your account, and that's utilizing whole life insurance. So what you can do is you can overfund a whole life policy. For those of you guys that don't know, like, you have term insurance, which is you're paying monthly and then you get paid out upon death. Whole life, usually it's sold as the worst product in creation, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's so much more money. And then I found out that I can take $100,000 out of my bank. I can put it into this whole life policy. It grows at 4 or 5%, and then I take collateral against it. I can get a loan up to 90% of what the cash value is in my policy. And then also too, if anything were to happen to me, it's backed by the death benefit. So like the example is, it's that a whole life policy works just the same way as your home equity loan does. So over time you pay into the policy, that increases your equity. Your primary residence, as you pay your payments, it increases your equity, right? But with a whole life policy, you don't have any underwriting. So if you don't make enough money, you actually can't get a HELOC. If you have too much debt, you can't get a HELOC. Whole life policy, they don't even care, because it's a policy. It's not a physical asset. So that's something that I'm working towards, where I'm looking to kind of like utilize different products to leverage against. And this is all things like anybody could do. It's just, it's not really spoke about, honestly. At least in the right ways, and how to be tactical about it. Like, you'll hear the general knowledge of it, but like they won't have the nitty gritty of like, hey, this is what you do. This is where you get it. This is how much you ask for. So you would have to have this policy for a few years before you know. So you could take $100,000 and dump it into a whole life policy, and then within 30 days, pull up to 90% of that value. So you don't need to wait. Now, if you don't, so the trick is you have to overfund it. If you don't overfund it, then yes, you have to wait until the cash accumulates. There's usually like a break even at like year 8. But that's another resource. And the reason why I started doing this is because if I take my own money and I liquidate it from my account, I have no money, right? It's not growing. It's only growing within that project. Right. And it's stuck in that project. And if something were to happen to me, the only thing that's left is the equity in that project. And what if the person that gets passed on can't fulfill that project? Right. Whereas if I took a loan against my policy, I now have a loan for the policy that's getting paid off by the dividends of the policy. If anything were to happen to me, it's collateralized by the death benefit. So now I have a project worth 500,000. My policy pays a death benefit of $1 million. If anything happens to me, it pays off the property and plus 500,000. And then now you're protected. This is literally what the banks do to you. Like the banks do this to you guys. Like they take your money, they lend it out, and then they have policies against the money. You know, like PMI, private mortgage insurance, like that's insurance that if you stop making payments, that they'll be covered in the event of you not making payments. So it's just a way, like some terms you'll hear, it's like called infinite banking. But that's another kind of option. And then something too, like I just realized is you can get a whole life policy the day you're born. So if you have kids or something like that, you know, a lot of people talk about, oh, get a property for them. All right, well, why don't you get them a whole life policy that you don't have to manage a property, you don't have to talk to a tenant, you don't have to do anything, and their actual health rating is the day from when they're born. So they're going to pay the cheapest premiums, they're going to pay everything. And then if you ever need to tap into that policy yourself, you can take loans against it, at the time that they're 18, they'll have cash value where they can take a loan against it to buy a property. They can take a loan against it to use for college. They can do anything with it. Or they can just keep letting it grow. So that policy, you know, it's split up into like 10 pay, 15 pay, 20 pay, and you can do that. But this is something that I just figured out that I'm sharing with you guys because it's super, super valuable, especially
You gotta go to work.
in agents like in our business. Because essentially we don't have a 401k
About
plan. We don't have that
investing in
kind of stuff.
properties and how to do some things.
I don't know if you want to mute that.
I got her. I think I got her.
But yeah, so it's something interesting as I look at like a full scope of investing, you know, like what are the risks associated with it? And then also too, long-term, you know, eventually like I want to become the lender, right? So if I have a whole life policy that's overfunded over the next 30 years, I can now just take that and just lend you guys money for projects and just manage the money through projects.
Awesome. This is all incredible, Joe. And to leverage off of that, I think Leaders Edge on Tuesday is looking to bring in at least one or two financial experts that can even speak to this further. This is all incredible information. So thank you so much. We've kept you a little bit over, Joe, but you're just like hitting, you talk about grand slams. You just keep hitting them today. I think you've offered a tremendous amount of value and a lot of food for thought and really given people the context of, you know, what are some of the questions I have to ask to start to frame out some projects and make this happen and hit those goals this year. So thank you so much. I want to take a quick second to just throw some information up there with Joe, with his contacts, with his email address. If you have any follow-up questions, Joe is an absolutely valued member of the ROAC team and certainly a valued member of Leaders Edge. So again, Joe, I just can't say enough how much we appreciate your time today and your contribution. This is really, really awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.